What if the voice on your radio started answering questions you had not asked yet, calling you by a name no one uses, and telling you to arrive 5 minutes earlier than the accident that has not happened? What if a body camera kept recording after you powered it down, capturing angles from places no person could stand? Some stories are too disturbing to be true, but what if they're the ones your town was built on, paved over by asphalt and policy, waiting for your headlights to wake them? Welcome back to Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. We are driving into the places patrol cars idle with engines ticking, into evidence rooms that smell like cold steel and lemon cleaner, into houses where the warrant came too late. From eerie voices on the dispatch channel to reports that rewrite themselves. Every story here is a mystery waiting to unfold, one red and blue pulse at a time. Which story creeped you out the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you make it to the end, drop a flashlight emoji so I know you are still with me in the dark. Story 1. The last dispatch at mile marker 19. I do not scare easy. But when a voice on your radio uses the name your father whispered when you were 6 and feverish, your grip changes without meaning to, and the road seems to lean toward you like it wants your weight. The heater ticked like an insect inside the dash. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and winter breath. The clock glowed 3:41 in tired red. No one on shift calls me that. No one alive. The unit channel was quiet enough to hear the carrier breathe. I told myself it was some bored trucker playing with a scanner, some prank bouncing off a tower. Still, I turned the volume up instead of off. If you have ever heard that kind of voice, you know you do not shut it out. You try to understand it before it understands you, right? Unit 7, the voice said. Softer, more certain. You're going to want to be at 19 by 4:17. Mile marker 19 is a dead stretch. 2 lanes. One service road hidden by switchgrass. I was rolling past 17.19. My fiancée, Mara, was asleep at home, counting on a quiet night. My sergeant was a single write-up away from delaying my transfer. I had every reason to ignore Whisper. The fog made halos around the reflectors. Then I reached up to flip the visor mirror, and a slip of paper fluttered out. It was the same note that has always been there, scrawled by a deputy I barely knew. In case of deer, a phone number. Why did it look freshly written, with a little smear where the ink had not dried? I picked up the little whistle on my key ring without thinking. It is a child's metal whistle. My dad gave it to me when I was small and thought sounds could summon help. The whistle is dented where I bit it once during fever dream. I had not blown it in years. It felt too heavy for what it was. I could hear it before I even raised it, somewhere else, faint, as if the ditch itself had lungs. I flicked the siren to warn a slow tractor, and the red and blues washed the fog into a moving curtain. The radio crackled, and I finally pressed the mic. Dispatch, Unit 7. Who is on channel? Static held its breath. Then I heard my own voice a half second before I spoke. My question repeated in perfect delay. Not an echo, a prediction. The fog grew into pale ribs between the trees. When I reached mile marker 18.5, something ticked under the driver's side front tire. Not a pothole, a series. The cruiser arched, not much, but enough to make the wheel angle wrong. The steering pulled. I slid onto the shoulder and stepped out into air that smelled like river water and cleaning solvent. My boot scuffed something that rang like a coin. A strip of tiny teeth made of cut roofing nails lay trembling in the gravel. They had kissed my tire clean. No tread left to argue, and the sign for mile 19 ahead looked wrong, bent and facing inward like it wanted me to see the back and not the front. I radioed the puncture and felt stupid doing it. Then I heard myself radio the puncture a heartbeat before my thumb pressed. I stood there with the mic held like an argument, staring at the bent sign. Someone had twisted it to point toward the service road entrance, almost hidden in switchgrass. Fog licked at the opening like a tongue. If this was a prank, it was smart enough to cost me a tire in one gentle step. I could call for a tow, sit tight, and let someone else take the call. Or I could walk the last half mile and see what wanted me enough to speak like my father. I chose the wrong answer because it sounded like duty. The gravel on the service road looked unused, but the grass was pressed as if someone had walked through last night and the night before. I clicked my body cam on and watched the green LED wink. It went from full to 3/4 in one blink. The cold stung my fingers. Somewhere in the brush to my right, something breathed in time with my steps. I raised my light and caught a gray pickup in a shallow ditch. Its engine idled in the way an engine idles when no one is in the seat. The headlights were off. The cup holder held half a beer with sweat on the can. I swept the beam across the dash. Dust traced my light. Dust on an idling dash does not make sense. The key was in the ignition, but there was a layer of fine dirt on the key head, enough to dull the chrome. Set dressing, I thought. Somebody staged this. The truckers talk on their CB about a drunk in a gray pickup who almost sideswiped them. A local legend to blame for bad nights. It would be so easy to think I had found him asleep. I touched the hood. Cold. No one under my fingers. Only the faint buzz of my own radio, whispering little D between static in a way that made my throat dry. The body cam screen blinked. For a second, the angle shifted to show the top of my hat from 15 feet above. No one stood there. The screen returned to normal with a bright hiccup. I told myself it was moisture. I told myself that a lot that night, and most of it was not true. I heard the whistle then, not from my hand, from the ditch beyond the pickup, like a kid at the end of a field using all his breath. I looked down. My whistle was on my ring. I could feel its cold shape against my palm. But the sound was in the dark brush, not in my fist. I swung the light and saw a flash of reflective strip. An ambulance sat across the service road ahead, at an angle that completely blocked it, as if someone had decided a soft barricade was kinder than cones. Its rear doors were slightly ajar. My nose filled with lemon cleaner, so sharp it made my eyes water. Even from here I could see clear tracks back toward mile 19, looping like a poor circle, as if the ambulance had been driven in slow circles until the tires traced a ring. Unit 7, status. That was not the dispatcher. That was me a minute in the future, concerned in my own tone. The radio swore it was now. I wanted to thumb the power off. I left it on. That is how you key control, I told myself. That is how you make an audio record for the sergeant with a neat chain of events. But control sometimes is the shape of a trap you choose because it looks like your hand. I walked to the ambulance. Light low, because bright beams make you visible to anything that prefers you not to be. Inside, the air was cold and sweet with disinfectant. The gurney straps hung loose. No equipment. No crew. The cabinet doors were closed, but the latches were not engaged, as if someone had expected to leave fast and never did. On the counter lay an evidence bag. My breath fogged it. Inside was a set of keys on a ring with a dented child's whistle. A tag stapled through the plastic read Mora, Daniel. Date was tonight. Time blank. The bag was sealed. I stared at the duplicate of something I could feel in my pocket, and I did not move. If I broke the seal, I would admit the world had already counted me as an object. That felt like a line I could not uncross. So I did not. I only pressed my hand to the bag and felt the whistle imprint through the plastic like a cold coin against a cheap glove. The ambulance doors swung a little, as if the vehicle sighed. Then both doors drifted shut with the tender patience of a hand closing a book. I tried them. They were secure from the outside. I could get out. But the idea of opening them and finding them locked next time made me choose not to. I stepped into the driver compartment and checked the dash. The clock was off. The radio was on. The radio was tuned to our dispatch frequency. It hissed, and then, clear as a doorbell, my visor slip's number rang the ambulance speaker. The whole dashboard answered my little scrap of paper. I pulled my phone and dialed that number to prove it would ring some distant warden of deer. My cruiser's radio chirped in the distance on the shoulder beyond the grass. I called myself, and I answered, and the line between began to feel very short. I backed out with the phone to my ear and nearly tripped on a loop of hose someone had dropped and never coiled. My boot slid. The little puncture signature was stamped again and again like a clerk was checking me, and over and over. The delayed echo of my choice to keep walking had been waiting in the dirt the whole time. How many times had I been here? I will not lie and say I did not think about leaving. I could have turned off the radio, walked back to the cruiser, called for a tow, and sat on the hood with coffee steam under my chin. But I could hear the approaching sound of highway from both directions, which is not how sound should behave. The bent mile 19 sign faced backward toward me like a face turned the wrong way, and it pointed at this service road like a finger. I had already answered a ring for myself. I had already set my keys in a bag without touching them. How do you exit a story that has already written your name on the last page? The radio gave me a mercy. 4:06, it said, "Calm paternal. You have 11 minutes." I looked at my dash clock. 4:06. It had not felt like 25 minutes since the first whisper. It felt like 3 minutes stretched long. The fog made the road sound close. I could hear an engine, even though none was on in front of me. The gray pickup's cup sweat had dried into a sticky ring. The truck's hood grew dustier each time I looked. The red herring was helpful because it gave me something foolish to believe for a while. I believed it right up until I opened the door and saw the inspection sticker dead 2 months and the odometer zeroed from a battery disconnect. This was a stage prop. My own cruiser's earlier pursued audio from a different night bled across the channel out of order. That is why the screeching tire sound fit and did not fit at once. I had been chasing myself in the edit. 4:14, the radio said. "Little D, listen." The word listen carries the shape of a hand on the back of your neck, if your father used to say it when you were talking instead of hearing him. My dad taught me to blow the whistle before crossing, to make something notice you that might not. I put the whistle to my lips and hesitated. If I call attention the wrong direction, I could make the collision. If I stay quiet, the road decides for me. Choice is a coin. Either face spins. Issues. I blew. The sound cut the fog like silver. It sounded not like a note, but like a memory of a note. It moved outward, then curved in like the road had a rim. From the direction of the highway proper, a pair of headlights swam into white. They were not fast. They were steady in the way of someone who has driven this road too many nights and has a superstition about speed. I saw my own reflector in the glass. I stepped into the lane, arms up, palm flat. I'm not an idiot. I stayed off the path of the wheels. The car approached anyway, as if my map of where wheels go and where I go is wrong. The radio said 4:17, and a cleaner, colder smell filled my mouth, that lemon that freezes the tongue. I shouted. I did not shout words I would be proud to play back. The headlights were my cruisers. No one was in the driver's seat. The wheel turned by itself a quarter inch to follow the service road, loop the bent sign fed it. My own siren chirped once without my hand. The body cam LED burned solid. Then the picture in my head became very small and very bright. Not impact, not gore, just the world blinking and the certainty that the loop had expected me here all along. Something touched my shoulder, gentle as a father waking a child. I stepped aside in time to feel wind lift my coat and see my own cruiser glide past inches from my knee, roll over the strip of teeth that were no longer there, and coast to a stop against the ambulance bumper with the sigh of an exhausted animal curling to sleep. I stood in an unkind stillness. The fog seemed relieved. like a singer who finally found the last note. The radio crackled. Unit 7, status. It was my sergeant this time. Real, sleepy, irritated to be awake. I swallowed and tasted cleaner. Unit 7, I said, and heard myself say it half a second before I did. All is quiet at 19. The old lie felt like a blanket you keep even when it itches. My legs shook and kept shaking. The gray pickup was not there anymore. The beer was a circle of dust on the ground. The ambulance doors were closed. The evidence bag was gone from the counter. A scuff on the laminate outline where it had been like a ghost that had sweated and dried. I walked around my cruiser and looked at the front bumper. A smear of fog hung on the push bar like silk. No dents, no blood, no animal. No paint traded with anything but night. My tire was still flat. My footprints in the soft dirt looked fresh and also old. The missing tread teeth made a pattern I could have recognized on a plaster cast. I looked up at the mile 19 sign and understood why it had been bent. It was not pointing for me. It had been pointing me, a small difference that matters if you're counting loops. I climbed in the driver's seat and stared at the dash clock. 4:18 now. Stuttering between digits like a cheap alarm, trying to decide if you deserve rest. I picked up my keys. The whistle felt warm, as if I had been holding it longer than I remembered. I touched it to my tongue without meaning to. It tasted like pennies. The radio gave one last little click, then another voice spoke in a whisper small as lint. You are late. I closed my eyes. It was my father, or it was me using his memory to forgive myself for something I could not name. When I opened them, a drop of condensation fell from the microphone to my jeans and spread like the smallest map. I tried the ambulance doors again. This time they were locked. I cupped my hands to the glass. The interior was emptied down to the brackets. No gurney straps, no cabinet latches, just clean walls and a floor that smelled like lemon, so sharp it could cut your breath. If the evidence bag had never been there, then what had I touched? If the keys inside had not been mine, whose were they? My radio chirped once, a genuine chirp from dispatch, asking if I needed a tow. I said yes. I said it too fast. I said it with the voice of someone trying to make this into a normal roadside problem. You would have too, right? While I waited, I walked the arc my cruiser had taken. There were no teeth strips left, but my mind supplied them. At the place where my boot soles had left their little pattern most clearly, I kneeled and pressed my palm to the ground. It was cool and damp. Under my hand was a coin. Not a real coin. A circle of metal about the size of one, cut from a roofing shingle bracket, drilled through, tied with fishing line. Someone had strung a makeshift whistle. It matched the dent in mine. I put it to my lips. No sound came out. I set it back exactly where I found it, because taking it felt like adopting a stray that would never stop howling. The tow rolled up at 4:47. The driver was a man in a knit cap who had hauled half our town out of ditches. He joked about my luck. He leaned on my fender and squinted at the ambulance as if it had always been there and he had never noticed. When he walked past the bent sign, he bumped it with his shoulder. The sign creaked and straightened a hair. The angle looked a fraction less like a finger. The driver frowned at it the way people frown at a picture that seems off without knowing why. He asked me whether I had called it in. I said I had. He nodded without conviction. I rode with him to the station yard behind his flatbed, my cruiser chained down like a stubborn animal. The fog blew off us in ragged loops. When we turned, I glanced back at mile 19. In the gray, for an instant, I thought I saw myself standing by the service road, hand lifted, palm flat, as if asking the pass to slow. The figure lifted a whistle. The tow truck's mirror jittered and turned that person into a fence post. Or I decided that it did, because I wanted to. That is a choice too. Back at the precinct, the evidence room smelled like it always does, like steel shells and lemon cleaner that never quite masks the sense of kept stories. I signed my shift sheet and set my key ring down to fill out a tire repair requisition. When I picked the keys back up, a fine powder ring marked where they had been. Dust. The metal left a clean circle like an eclipse. There was a tag on the ring I had never seen. A tiny paper slip tucked between the keys and the whistle, folded hard. I unfolded it. In case of deer, it read in my own block print. The number was the station's general line, with one digit off. If you dial that wrong digit, you reach our radio room. If you dial it from inside the radio room, the desk phone rings 3 seconds before you press call. I walked to the body cam dock and slid the unit into its slot. The transfer bar filled, a green growing worm. I asked the tech to pull the clip and burn it so I could write up the puncture in the call. He's a quiet man. He moves like someone who sees a lot of things he does not want to put adjectives on. He came back 10 minutes later with a USB and a look like a person who tasted a lemon and did not want to admit he had. Your camera, he said, not meeting my eyes. It recorded something while you were out of frame. It recorded from above your head for 2 seconds. Nobody was standing there. He smiled without humor. Neat trick. I watched the clip on my desk with the volume low enough not to wake a mouse. The camera shows my chest light walking toward the pickup. Then it shows my hat from 15 feet up. Between the two, the timestamp jumps to 4 hours and 17 minutes, and then back to 4 hours, 16 minutes, and 58 seconds, a short cough in time. The angle from above catches the whistle on my key ring with perfect clarity. It vibrates as if someone has blown it from very close. Only no one is in the shot. The audio is all static until a whisper curls out of the hiss and calls me Little D with a warmth that made my eyes sting. I paused and stared at the pixels until they felt like rain. I wrote the report plain. Road hazard puncture. Unoccupied ambulance obstructing service road. Vehicle towed. No incident. I did not mention the bag with my name. I did not mention the loop print of my tread. A week later, they replaced the mile 19 sign. It stands straight now. The new bolts shine in daylight. At night, it still looks a hair turned the wrong way. The whistle on my keys tastes like pennies when it used to taste like nothing. Sometimes the radio picks up a trucker telling a story about a gray pickup that nobody can catch. Sometimes the body cam battery drains for no reason and then gives back a little charge as if it thought better of something. And at 4:17, if I am awake and near a window, the street outside flickers the color of a siren it does not have. I have not used the visor note since that night. I keep it tucked where it falls, but I will not dial it. I am afraid of being answered by my own voice telling me what I am about to say. I am afraid of hearing my father tell me I am late. Yet sometimes when the house is too quiet and the lemon scent from the kitchen wipes catches on the heater, I catch myself imagining a different choice. Turn off the radio. Leave the whistle in the drawer. Let mile 19 be just a piece of steel on a pole, pointing at the next piece of steel on a pole. Then I hear the faintest breath of wind across a hollow tube, like a child's toy asking for notice, and I know the loop is patient. If you drive that stretch and your radio speaks in a voice that seems to know you, I hope you keep driving. Or I hope you stop. Both are wrong answers for different reasons. The right answer may be something smaller, like straightening a sign a single degree so it points at the road and not at you. I've tried to do that in my own ways. Sometimes I wake at 4:17 with the sour taste of cleaner in my mouth and my hand closed around my whistle as if someone pressed it there to wake me. One last thing. The evidence clerk found a sealed bag misfiled behind a stack of empty envelopes last night. I was in the room doing nothing important when he called out and waved it. The bag had no barcode. Inside was a ring of keys with a dented child's whistle. The tag was blank. No name. No date. Just a time written in pencil, smudged, like someone had pressed a thumb before it dried. If you hold it to the light, you can almost read it. It looks like 4:1 something. It could be 4:17, or it could be the curve of the plastic, making anything look like anything. We put it back where he found it, because neither of us wanted to sign our names. Story 2. Body cam 47 never blinks. The first thing you need to know is that the red LED on Unit 47 doesn't blink. It stares. Even when you power it down and feel the click, the light holds like a tiny animal eye in your palm. I told myself it was a stuck diode. I told myself a lot of things that week. I had 4 hours left on probation, for hours to keep my jacket clean, and a camera that watched me like it already knew whether I would make it to sunrise. If you have ever ridden nights, you know how the cruiser mirror turns into a second moon. Mine lagjit. I would turn my head and my reflection would follow a heartbeat late, mouth still moving on a word I had already swallowed. I wiped the glass and the lag stayed. That should have sent me back to the tech bench. Instead, I clipped 47 on because my sergeant had said one more equipment note and I could hand him my badge. Eager kills more rookies than anything else, just slower. The file counter on the cam showed 3 clips left. It should have shown hours. Storage had been wiped at lineup. I tapped the display and the numbers rolled backward like an odometer under a careful finger, landing on 03 with a neat mechanical pride. The first clip played itself when I brushed the housing. It showed me outside a pale blue bungalow, knocking on a door under a burned-out porch light. I leaned in without knowing why, because I had not been to any blue bungalows tonight. Then my radio, chirp and noise complaint on Harbor Street, pale blue house, light out. I parked on Harbor and told myself it was coincidence. The porch light was dead in the exact way a sick tooth dies, dull and dark in daylight. I could smell old frying oil and cold laundry. My reflection in the window showed me standing a hair too still. The lag in the glass made it look like 2 of me, one patient, one impatient. I watched that other me lift his knuckles. Then I knocked because that is what the footage had shown, and because not knocking felt like arguing with a mirror that always wins. A woman cracked the door and blinked hard at my vest cam instead of my face. Her television murmured a game show rerun. No noise problem, she said, just the neighbor's wind chimes and her husband's CPAP machine. I thanked her and backed off, telling myself to breathe. Back at the cruiser, I watched the clip again. The camera's angle was a touch higher than my chest. For 2 seconds, the frame seemed to float above my hat brim and then click back where it belonged. Moisture, I decided. The light did not blink. Everyone at the precinct knows the rumor about the old tech who spliced cams to prank rookies. The story is as stale as the lemon cleaner in the evidence room. They say he once looped an officer's own audio, so she heard herself asking questions before she asked them. They say he got fired or moved or died. The lieutenant winks when he tells it, as if a ghost in IT would be easier to train than a living rookie. It was easier to believe a prank than a future recording. So I believed the prank until it tripped over facts. My next call was a trespass at a laundromat. I cleared the building alone because everyone else was tied up at a bar fight without punches. While I walked the aisles of sleeping machines, my cam chirped and saved a clip I hadn't started. When I peeked at it in the cruiser, the footage showed me handcuffing a skinny man by the soap dispensers while someone filmed over my shoulder. The angle was from just behind my right ear. Only I had been alone in that room, and my right ear had felt cold like someone standing close to blow on it without breath. The man on the screen looked familiar in the way people look familiar when they are about to make a mistake in front of you. Blue hoodie, nervous hands. I paused and scrubbed the timestamp. It said 2:19. My dash clock read 2:11. The future is not a path. It is a stamp somebody picks up and tries on different papers. I checked the trash can by the soap dispenser and found a wallet with 3 cards and no cash. The man from the footage walked in 5 minutes later, eyes flicking to where his hand had already decided to reach. I hadn't seen him yet, but the cam had. I made the arrest exactly the way the clip showed, which felt like tracing a drawing a child did of your face. My name sounded strange in the room, like a line someone had taught me phonetically. The man muttered that he knew his rights because a cop had told him once before in this exact laundromat. When I played the clip after booking, the angle from behind my shoulder held too steady to be a wall camera. There isn't one in there. There is a mirror on the change machine. In the mirror, my reflection lagged a heartbeat again, and in the lag, I saw myself turn my head toward a sound I didn't remember hearing. By hour 3, the Staticom on playback had taken on shape. If sound can have breath, this had mine. A tightness on the inhale where my nose was broken in high school. A whistle you only hear when you are afraid and try not to show it. I pretended not to recognize myself. The red light on 47 stared as I drove a slow loop along the river. I kept the radio on scan, and every other channel sounded like a person standing in a tiled room listening to himself in a bucket. I needed a real answer, so I cornered one of the older guys by the coffee pot and asked about the prankster tech. He smiled without his eyes and said the man's name like a joke. Then he stopped smiling. "He's dead," he said, tones sudden and flat. 5 years. Aneurysm in his sleep. Don't say it around the chief. He looked down at my cam and added, almost tender, 47, huh? We used to call that one the teacher. Nobody learned. He walked away like he'd given me a piece of candy and regretted it. If you want to solve a riddle you did not ask for, you check the maintenance logs. I pulled them up between calls and found Unit 47's serial etched deeper than the others in a brittle handwriting that looked like it had tried too hard to be precise. Next to most entries was a single note. Returned. No reason, no repair, just returned, as if the cam had declined service. The last line was a timestamp with no officer initials. Beside it, a phrase in the margin, 47th attempt. It was faint enough to look like a rub mark if you were not looking. That phrase felt like a key slid under a door. Attempt number what exactly? Attempts at what? I almost unpinned the camera and set it in the glove box. Then I remembered the sergeant's warning and pictured my girlfriend's face if I came home in street clothes with a box of my life and a speech. If you have ever promised someone you would stick with the plan, you know how heavy a small decision can be. I left 47 on my chest. I told myself that meant I still owned the night, not the other way around. Around 3:15, the camera saved a clip on its own. No button press. No yod. The thumbnail showed the view through my windshield at the curve by the old cannery. Headlights. A wet shine of road. The clip's clock read 3:22. When I played it, the cruiser in the footage skidded on a dark ribbon no one else was driving on. The angle kicked sideways. There was the quick cough of my own breather, the little broken nose whistle, louder now as if the helmet of my skull had been leaned on. The frame froze an inch from the guardrail. The red LED in the reflection of the glass did not blink. I could have avoided that curve. I could have idled at the lot on Maple until 3:23 and laughed out loud. But the call stacked. A report of lights in the cannery. Possible trespass. I drove toward the curve with both hands on the wheel and my mouth dry enough to stick to my teeth. I dropped 5 miles per hour under, then 10. I counted the reflectors aloud like beads. When the road slick appeared, thin as a snake and just as real, I braked gently. The cruiser nudged sideways anyway, polite at first and then certain. I corrected and missed the guardrail by the breath you used to say a name. I said mine. The camera saved another clip in that same breath. The thumbnail was black. When I played it, the frame showed my passenger window from the outside, as if someone was pacing me on the shoulder, face pressed to the glass, looking in. You can see your own outline best when you are scared and the light is wrong. The outline of me in that glass looked like a man about to make a very specific mistake. I pulled over hard, let my heart catch, and watched my reflection lag in the black glass for 2 beats before it caught up and looked ashamed. Isolation is not just being alone. It is hearing your own voice on the radio a second before you say anything. It is thinking you will call for a supervisor and realizing you have not earned that call yet. It is being on a night shift where everyone is dealing with a fight, a fire, a family that will not put down knives, and your problem is an LED. My phone buzzed with a text from my girlfriend that only said you okay. I typed a lie. The lie tasted like lemon cleaner. The cannery sat on the river like a barge that forgot how to float. My cam clicked the way it does when it writes to storage. The file counter rolled to 02. I swept the first floor and found nothing but old pallets and a smell like damp paper. The second floor had a row of broken windows that looked back at me with a compassion I did not deserve. In one of those panes, my reflection lagged, then surged ahead for a fraction and showed me turning right when I was planning to turn left. I turned right because I was already watching myself do it, and because my plan did not have confidence left. At the far stairwell, the cam fed me a new clip without asking. The frame was low and close, like someone had set the camera on the top step and walked away. It showed me climbing into view, pausing to listen, head tilted, hand on the rail. In the audio, the static breath deepened like a person bracing to pick up a weight. Then a shadow crossed the lens. My uniform sleeve. A scrape sounded, not metal on metal, but nylon against concrete. The clip cut out as if someone had pinched it closed. I said the old text name out loud, because talking to the dead is a way to pretend you understand a room. The stairwell returned nothing. The handrail was slick with condensation. My light shook a little. Halfway up, 47 vibrated against my chest, and the red LED brightened. Not blink, just a stronger stare. It felt like I was about to step into a frame I had already filled. The choice was plain: back out and write this up as a false alarm with a maintenance note, or walk into whatever the camera thought I needed. I walked. Point of no return is a phrase training officers like to use on traffic stops. It applies to stairs too. Third landing. The air thinned to the taste of cold coins. The static hum of my earphones turned into breathing I recognized like a song you hate because you wrote it. I panned my light and caught a figure at the end of the hall. Blue hoodie, hands tucked. The laundromat man. He flinched at the beam and ran. The hallway T-boned into a catwalk over the old loading floor. To the right, daylight holes to the river. To the left, darkness you could swim in. He went left. I followed, footsteps loud in the hollow metal like someone clapping too soon. My radio hiccuped with a supervisor's voice and then smeared into my own whispering calm commands I had not said yet. The camera's screen, in the little reflection you notice only when you're shaking, showed the word saving over and over in a queue. I was building a future I did not consent to. Halfway down the catwalk, the grated floor sagged and made a sound like exhale. The hoodie figure was a silhouette at the end, but he had stopped running. He stood with his head down, shoulders heaving like an animal, deciding if it is trapped. I slowed and kept distance and did the voice people teach you in academy, low and confident and kind. He turned. Nah, man. A tarp. Blue. Its edge flapped and made a shape like a shoulder. The catwalk railing had a gap where someone had pulled a panel for scrap. I was talking to cloth. Behind me, on the recording I had not watched yet, I heard my own intake turn sharp and then softer, a rhythm I knew from nightmares. The red LED on 47 reflected in a window ahead, and in the reflection, there were two of me, for a fraction, one already falling. If you have ever been forced to choose between the way a thing looks and the way it is, you know how stubborn your body can be. I backed away, slow, locked my elbows, centered my weight. The great complained anyway. A piece shifted under my heel in a way that makes the whole world tilt even if the metal holds. That is how small the difference can be between a story you tell later and a name on a plaque. I tasted the lemon again and knew it wasn't in the air. It was memory. I made a decision I cannot take back. I unpinned 47 and held it out at arm's length like a divining rod, sweeping it across the dark. If the camera wanted a picture so badly, it could take one without leaning on my chest. I had this stupid thought that if I could make the footage wrong, I could break the loop. The LED stared at the far window. The display flickered a title it hadn't shown before. Final entry. Right under it, faint like a palimpsest under cheap paper, another line. 47th attempt. I do not remember deciding to throw it. My arm moved. The unit sailed and hit the catwalk with a small, clean sound like a coin dropped in a church. It skittered toward the gap. For a single cold second, the LED reflected in the window looked like a red eye rolling away from me, and a lag in the glass showed a version of me still holding it while my hand was already empty. The camera slid through the gap and fell. It did not clatter on the concrete below. The static hum rose like someone took a deep breath in the dark and held it. Everything that followed felt like walking into a photo of the moment before lightning. I backed against the wall and called it in with a voice that sounded older than I felt. I reported a lost unit, a hazard, a possible trespasser who might be nothing. The supervisor said we would look in the morning and told me to clear. I did not argue. On the way down, the stairwell smelled like cleaner in a new bottle. My reflection in the change machine at the base gave me one more lag, then matched me perfectly, as if it had decided we were done being coy. Back at the precinct, I did the thing that felt like penance. I wrote it up straight. I checked a box for property loss. I walked to the evidence room to sign the chain and saw a shape on the counter under a clear bag. Unit 47. It sat there in a sealed sleeve with my initials already in thin marker, the kind of marker that smudges if you breathe too hard. The LED stared. The bag fogged where the lens sat, as if it had warmed itself with breath. My breath matched the fog patches without meaning to. The clerk said someone found it at my locker and thought I had logged it. I told myself to walk away. I picked up the bag instead. The light inside did not blink. The display glowed through plastic just long enough to flash the file list. The top entry had a timestamp of 4 o'clock. The clock on the wall read 3:58. Under the time was the title again, less faint now, confident as a gravestone. Final entry. I slid the bag back and signed the line and stepped out, so quickly my shoulder brushed the jam and raised a squeal like a whispered laugh. I thought I could beat it by procedural righteousness. I could keep 47 sealed, go finish the last hour, turning clean, and let text do their work in the sunlight where red LEDs lose their strength. The sergeant caught me at the door and asked why my cam was bagged. I told him the story with the joke's pride out. He listened with that old kindness people learn after they have learned not to stick their hands in certain machines. Then he said, "Quiet, that probation ends when you walk out, not when you declare yourself done." He told me to borrow any other unit and finish the shift. The other units were signed out. The drawer held only 45 and 46. Both were dead on battery. 47 looked at me from inside the bag and did not look away. Choice is a narrow hallway. I cut the tape and took the camera out. The light brightened like a cat's eye when a door opens. I clipped it on without turning it on and felt it hum, a small meat sound, like the throat of a person who has agreed to sing once more. The last call was a welfare check on a man who hadn't answered his sister in 2 days. Old brick building, 3rd floor, narrow stairs with carpet that learned the shape of feet and never forgot. My cam saved a clip in the lobby while I waited for the landlord. The thumbnail showed me standing at the 3rd floor landing, head tilted, listening. The time read 4:11. My phone said 4:03. The landlord showed with keys and a smell of coffee and nerves. The door opened to a quiet, tidy room, ashtray clean, a mug with a skin of tea, a single chair turned toward the window like it had expected a view. No one inside. From the hall, a sound like someone practicing breathing. In through nose, out through mouth. A calm rhythm that tries to make you match it. I did not match it. I moved toward the stairwell and felt the carpet give under my heel where the pad has rotted by habit. The cam display flickered without text. At the landing, the emergency exit window reflected a small man with a big camera and a red that never closed. The reflection lagged and then, for the first time all night, ran ahead. It showed me reach for the rail before I thought to, shown like a courtesy, a mercy, or a demand. I gripped the rail and waited. Nothing moved. Then a door below opened on a puff of lemon air that did not belong to any cleaning crew awake at that hour. I heard my own inhale on the recorder before I took it. The voice that came out of the static said my name like a teacher correcting a paper. Marcus, the way my mother says it when I forget to call. The way I say it when I'm trying to wake myself without startling. The red LED reflected in the window looked like an elevator button you press and cannot unpress. I snapped the cam off its clip. I wanted to set it down and step away and make the reflection wrong again. The display flashed a message as if it had been waiting to be in my hand to speak. Syncing previous. Under that, for a breath, a line I think only I could hear because I was the only one holding my own breathing. It is yours. The hum of static shaped itself into the broken nose whistle, obvious now that I admitted it. I powered the unit down, felt the click, saw the red dot hold steady as if the word off was something I had invented to comfort myself. You want a clean ending? I wanted a clean ending too. I left the building without a body and with a camera that felt heavier than plastic. I signed out at 4:59 with my sergeant tapping his pen and my girlfriend's text doing circles on my lock screen. In a locker room, I set 47 on the bench and pointed it face down like a punishment. The reflection in the metal of my locker lagged and then matched. I breathed and counted to 10 and told myself I was not cursed, just tired. The tech called me at noon while I pretended to sleep. He said my cam had kept recording in the evidence dock with no power, and he thought I should know before someone else did. He laughed once without humor and asked me to come see something. I went because you go when a person who doesn't scare easily tells you they have questions. On his monitor, the file tree showed the newest clip at 4:17. Title, Final Entry. When he played it, the angle was from the top of a stairwell, looking down at the third-floor landing where a man stood with his head tilted, listening. Me. I watched myself do the thing I had already done, which is a peculiar shame. The audio was only breathing. Mine. Slow, calm, as if someone had finally taught me the rhythm I refused to match. At the end of the clip, the screen filled with the reflection of a red dot in a window that looked like an elevator door. The LED never blinked. The file name saved itself with a suffix like a joke nobody wanted to tell. 47_attempt_047_final.mp4. The tech paused and scrolled. Under that, grayed out, as if a system had been keeping its own notes, a line none of the other units ever show. Ready for attempt 48. I'm still on days now. Probation cleared. People say I seem older on the radio, like I'm always listening for something just off channel. I get rid of mirrors without thinking. I walk stairs with a hand on the rail. The red LED on the new cam blinks like a heartbeat, and I thank it under my breath every time. Sometimes late, my living room window shows me a half second after I pass, a ghost of emotion that waits to complete itself. Sometimes I swear I hear my own broken nose whistle in the HVAC when the heat kicks on. Unit 47 sits in an evidence drawer with a sticker that says out of service, and the light glows through the plastic like it needs nothing from the sun. I have never opened the bag again. When I visit the room, the clerk jokes and asks if I want to trade for a good luck charm. I say I already have one and touch the ridge on my nose. The file list inside the bag shows nothing from after that night, but the counter still rolls backward to 03 when the screen wakes and then holds, as if it is waiting for me to choose which 3 moments I want to live again. If you ever get assigned 47 and you'll, because everything cycles, do yourself a favor. Blink when it will not. Breathe when it tries to teach you how. If it shows you something you haven't done yet, do not race it and do not refuse it. Walk like the floor is listening, because sometimes it is. And if the reflection in the glass gets ahead of you, let it go. Let somebody else arrive first for once. See if the world forgives the delay. Now we move to the third story. Story 3. Locker 13 at the Precinct. Locker 13 only opens for the sound of a mop bucket. If you have ever worked nights, you know the hush that rides in with the janitorial cart, the wheeled lullaby of a place letting its shoulders drop. That is when it happens. The padlock sighs, the metal gives a tired click, and the door eases an inch as if it has been listening for water all evening. I learned that in my last week before retirement, which should have been quiet paperwork and coffee, not a door that waited for me like a mouth. I have 20 years of polite monsters and patient puzzles behind me, and one son trying to forgive me for choosing this building too often. 1 week until I traded my badge for a garden and a phone that rings less. The precinct whispered about Locker 13 back when I was a rookie. No one had opened it since an officer walked out one night and never signed it again. They sealed the space and let the rumor do the rest. I do not chase rumors, but a leak started inside the locker, and leaks get my name. The first time I heard it, I was in the hallway signing a receipt for old evidence. A drip, patient and precise, from a locker that is as dry as a church. The padlock looked freshly scratched, tiny crescents around the shackle, like someone had been teaching it to behave. I set my palm on the cool steel and felt nothing, no vibration, just that quiet, confident drip behind it. The night crew rolled past. Their buckets sloshed, and the padlock clicked. It opened a single inch and stopped, as if it wanted to see who would lean closer first. I did not report it. I know how that sounds. You try counting the years you survived by procedure and tell me how easy it is to be the one who writes haunted locker on a form. Instead, I lifted the door slow and measured. Inside sat a small brown wallet flecked with something dark and dry. The ID window held a man's face who had filed a noise complaint with me 3 hours earlier. He had been very alive. He had offered me stale crackers and called me Miss instead of Detective. I do not like prop comedy, and I do not like coincidences that grin. I bagged the wallet on my own glove time and placed it on my desk under a stack of actual work, because lying to yourself goes better with paperwork. The next day, the man from the ID waved at me from his porch with a hose in his hand. He wore the same face, just less sure about his hedge. I started to warn him without knowing what I meant to warn him about. Then I told him to keep his door locked at night, because it made me sound sane. He thanked me and went back to making a rainbow on his concrete. Night 2, the drip again. The janitor's cart rattled past like a hymn. The padlock clicked 1 inch. Inside, a pinboard sheet lay propped like a postcard, for photographs duct taped on it, each taken from the same angle at the mouth of an alley off Maple. Broken bottle at the curb. Dumpster lit crooked. One shoe, child-sized but clean. In the corner of one image, a watch face reflected the photographer. The time was 12:13. My watch reflected like a coin. I have a scratch at the 7 that always gives me away. If you have ever seen your own ghost in a photograph you do not remember taking, you know the taste of cold pennies that follows. I walked Maple on my dinner break. I stood where the photos stood and saw the same crooked lid and the same bottle shape. The shoe was not there. The air smelled like rain on old brick. At 12:13, a couple argued at the far end of the block about a ride share that never came, and a cat came up from the basement stairs and looked like it wanted to say my name. I walked away because anticipating crimes is not the same as preventing them, and one gets you a medal while the other gets you a memo. I slept badly and dreamed about a faucet I could not close. Night 3 gave me the sound of dripping before I reached the hall. The cart did not need to pass for the lock to yield. The door eased. On the top shelf sat an unmarked envelope with my name in faint pencil, like someone had written timidly left-handed. Under it lay a plastic whistle, red and scuffed the way toys get scuffed when a child teaches them how to be alive. I have not seen my son's whistle since we packed his room for my divorce. And yes, that is the kind of sentence that tastes like metal. The envelope was light. The pencil letters of my name made my skin try to crawl backward. I did not open the envelope yet. Bad news ages better when you set on a shelf. I took the whistle in my palm and felt the crack in the plastic at the seam. My son bit that crack when he was 7 and decided whistling was a sport. I texted him because choices stack when you put them off. Are you in town? He wrote back too fast. For a few days. Coffee tomorrow. He added a smile I had not earned. I put the whistle in my coat and pretended it was not a message written in a language it used to be fluent in. When I tried to tell anyone about the locker, the words did not forgive me. The rookie on nights laughed and said the janitors plant things to scare new blood, that there is a betting pool. He lifted his phone and asked if I wanted to see a video of a sergeant screaming at a mop bucket last winter. I smiled the way older officers smile when they do not want to encourage a story. The red herring was easy to hold. It made the hallway warmer. Then I pulled camera logs and found a neat gap in the footage during the exact 10 minutes the cart rolled by. Dead air. No motion in. No motion out. The rookie's rumor folded itself into the trash without a fight. The next evening, the man from the wallet did not answer his door. A neighbor mentioned a friend's couch and a late night. I felt the little drumbeat under that answer that means something is going to happen whether you turn your head or not. The drip had been waiting for me when I arrived. When I lifted the locker door, there were more photographs of the Maple Alley. This time the shoe was present and placed, the bottle shattered into smaller glitter, and a smear at knee height on the dumpster that could be rust or something you do not talk about on air. The time in the reflection was 12:13 again, and I saw my watch face clearly enough to make my throat tighten. You have a choice before a thing happens. You can put a light there and look stupid if nothing comes. Or you can soften your steps and hope to be the last person who sees it before it hardens into report language. I set a car on Maple with a quiet rookie who owes me favors. I stood half a block away with my coat pulled up. At 12:13, 3 teenagers sprinted through the alley and hooped and did nothing to anyone. At 12:17, a man in a jacket like the one from the wallet cut through and paused by the dumpster to tie his shoe. He looked left, looked right, and when he looked up, somebody leaned out a window 3 floors above and dropped a bag that could have been trash. He ducked reflex. The bag burst. Coffee ground snowed, and a glass jar rolled and clinked once. and the man startled into a step that made sense of a smear. No one died. The alley wrote a small bruise into the night and kept its secrets. The photographs had been honest without being right. When I returned to the locker, the drip was gone. The padlock sat satisfied, a cat with a mouse tail under its paw. I opened it anyway and found my son's whistle in the envelope again, as if time had not passed. I broke the paper open with a nail and slid out a printed report form. At the bottom, my signature curved the way it does when my hand is tired. The date in the upper right corner was 2 weeks from today. The case caption read Locker 13. The charge line read none. The narrative box was empty, but for the first sentence. The scene presents itself nightly. If you have ever read your own writing before you wrote it, then you know the sensation of falling without moving. I placed the paper back in its bed and shut the door with the quiet of a person trying not to wake a thing. The padlock clicked itself. No hands, and a thin new scratch appeared around the shackle, like a fresh tally on a wall. The janitor rolled by with a nod. The bucket sloshed. The water rhythm set the locker breathing again in little metallic ticks I felt in my teeth. I made a mistake the next morning. I did not log the wallet. I told myself I would wait for context. I told myself context would be kinder if it came for me. That afternoon, patrol called me to a welfare check 2 streets from the wallet man. Inside the apartment, a coffee mug sat with a skin on it, and the TV muttered daytime in an empty room. The couch held a dent enough to tell you a person had a body in a habit. No one on the floor, no one on the bed. Later I found out he had caught a bus to his sister's in the hills. The wallet turned up in our evidence bin anyway, tagged by a day shift officer who swore I turned it in. The chain of custody showed my initials and a pen I do not own. Every item the locker showed me found its way to evidence. The photos of the alley were cataloged under an unrelated case and then slid into my pending file with a cheerful pink sticky I did not write. The whistle sat in my desk drawer until I found an identical one, scratched exactly the same way, sealed in a bag with the date of next Thursday. The envelope in the locker replaced itself nightly with the same form bearing my name. There is isolation you can choose, and then there's the variety that arrives when your friends notice you double-checking empty corners and start walking the long way around your desk. The red herring limped along for 2 more nights. The rookie confessed to sneaking a TikTok in the hallway. He claimed he had left a rubber rat under the locker row once to make a sergeant yelp. He blushed when he said it and apologized to me like a child who has learned the difference between a spook and a wound. I wanted to believe his mischief could explain an envelope with a date that hadn't happened yet. Then he showed me his clip. It ran for 6 minutes. In minute 4, the janitor's cart rolled by the lens with no one pushing it. The mop bucket sloshed independently and rolled exactly to locker 13, where the padlock clicked and the door eased 1 obedient inch. I know what you were thinking. Leave it closed. Ask for a transfer to daytimes early and let the rumor feed on the next person. That would have been the smarter move. That is not the move I made. The choice that cannot be undone came on a Tuesday night at 12:12 when the dripping sounded more like counting than water, and I decided to be the person who watched something happen instead of the person who read about it first. I sent my son a text that said, "I might be late for coffee. Proud of you." He responded, "I'm outside your building, surprise," and included a photo of our steps. I did not look. The padlock clicked. The door eased. I opened it all the way because some doors feel like questions, and I have always been too eager to answer. Inside, the locker was deeper than it should be. Not in measurement, in memory. I do not have poetry for it. The dark-held edges my light refused to name until it was on them. The drip was steady and close, but no plumbing runs that wall, and the janitor swears the nearest sink is broken shut. On the floor sat a shallow drain pan like the kind mechanics use, dry as a bone, shining like an eye. On the middle shelf, an evidence bag waited with the little blue line where you slide a zip and commit. The tag on it read Marrowy. The contents looked like a folded report and a key. The key was to locker 13. I reached for the bag and stopped because the smell and there was not water or metal. It was lemon cleaner, sharp enough to sting, the same scent that clings to our evidence room long after the stories stop. I checked the walls and found scratches inside. not outside, tiny crescents where fingers had tested the seams. They lined up neat at first, and then jagged where somebody had stopped being polite. The padlock swung on the open door like a pendulum practicing patience. I stepped all the way in to see the back corner because if you have put your head inside a throat, you may as well study the uvula. The photographs from Maple leaned upright on the back wall, angles matching angles that had not quite been born. Below them sat my son's red whistle, bagged and sealed, twin to the one in my coat, with next Thursday's date in thin marker. Beside it, the wallet, sealed, tagged with the initials of the officer who later swore he found it in the street. On the top shelf, the envelope with my name weighted like a form letter that has learned your habits. I broke the seal and slid out the report. The narrative box held one sentence now, in my own stubborn handwriting. The scene presents itself nightly and accepts what we bring. I did not bring anything. That was the problem. The locker had been arranging its own exhibits. The drip grew louder, more urgent, as if water were climbing toward me instead of falling. I looked down at the drain pan again. It trembled very slightly where a drop should have been, like a spider web breathes when a moth thinks. I tucked the envelope under my arm as proof for later and turned to leave. The padlock swung to the jamb in a slow arc and settled into its seat as gently as a parent tucking a child. The shackle kissed metal and scratched a new crescent around itself. I was inside when it did it. The dark felt like a blink that had decided not to open again. You do not call for help with words like haunted. You call for help with your badge number and the seriousness you say for shots fired, even when there are none. My radio, clipped to my belt, rasped to dead air. The janitor's cart rolled past, like a vigilant priest who will not interfere with ritual. I put my shoulder into the door and felt the hard truth of steel that loves its duty more than it loves you. I told myself this was a prank with poor timing. Then I told myself if I was being taught a lesson I might not live to laugh about. I sat on the floor because panic eats oxygen you need later. The drip slowed, which felt like a spite. In the dull light, the number 13 revealed itself in places I had not wanted to see it. Stamped into the key, printed on the corner of every photograph, scratched into the paint near the hinge in a childlike hand, crooked, as if written by someone inside a box. The envelope slid off my arm and landed in my lap. The report's last line had appeared under the first, faint, as if pressure had forced ink up from the paper beneath. Close at dawn. I looked at my watch and wanted to laugh. It was 12:47. I had hours to learn whether I was superstition or bone. I do not know if you pray. I do not, unless you count the way you learn to talk to rooms in this job. I told Locker 13 a story about the officer who walked out and never signed in. I told it the version where he did not disappear so much as leave himself somewhere and forget to go back for him. I told it I had a son outside who had chosen coffee with me over sleep, and that I still knew how to be someone's mother if the night would stop asking me to be everyone's detective. The door made no promises. The metal grew warm with use. At 3, my phone vibrated a message through my coat that I could not lift far enough to read. At 4, the drip stopped entirely, and that was worse. Dawn has a way of arriving like someone remembering your name. The cart passed. The wheels wobbled and sang their stitched rubber song. The building inhaled its first day shift breath. The padlock did not move. Then, at 5:01, a hand I could not see slid the shackle free like it had been waiting for a cue only it could hear. The door opened a careful inch. I pushed it the rest of the way and stood into a hallway that smelled like fresh coffee and lemon cleaner, which is to say home and the effort to make it home. The janitor looked at me and then graciously looked away. He does not get paid enough to catalog what people become in the dark. I walked to the sergeant's desk with my envelope under my arm and the whistle heavy in my coat and my knees noisy with old decisions. I told him I needed the camera logs and an hour with evidence. I did not tell him I had spent the night inside a piece of furniture and learned it had a heart. He would have believed me and then never let me be alone again, and retirement does not work with a chaperone. They found nothing on the cameras, of course. The hallway frames smear the moment the cart enters the shot. The audio catches a drip when no one is there to drip. The evidence room logged the wallet and the whistle under my name, with dates from days that had not occurred. My initials looked like mine, and also like someone trying to be me through a wall. The padlock, when I checked it that afternoon, sat smooth, no scratches, no tally marks. My memory keeps its own. I met my son for coffee in the bright part of day. He set the same kind of red whistle on the table as a joke about the old days and me calling him in for dinner from the porch. He said he had found it while cleaning his car. When I told him not to carry it downtown, he raised an eyebrow that looked like mine and asked if I had started believing in omens now that I had free time. I laughed more than the line deserved and switched the subject, which is a kind of confession if you know me. My retirement paperwork is in a neat folder on my kitchen table. The chief asked me if I wanted to delay a month to consult on a backlog of odd cases, which is how you say we do not know what to do with your story without saying it. The form at the bottom of the locker changed again last night. It had a third sentence in my handwriting now, thin and patient. The scene will close itself when it has what it came for. I do not know if that means a thing or a person or a mistake. If you ever walk our hallway at night and hear water without pipes, do me a favor. Keep walking or stop. Both feel like the wrong answer for different reasons. If the padlock clicks for you, do not teach it your name. If you open it, bring nothing you're not ready to see again with a tag on it. And if you see a red whistle in there with next Thursday's date, leave it for me. I'm trying to be quicker this time. I'm trying to be the kind of mother who can arrive early to a scene and stay. Now, it is your turn to choose what the dripping was. Condensation, a prank with poor taste, a timeline slowed by a door. I have my theories. The locker has its own. The padlock looked freshly scratched again this morning when I walked by, even though I watched it smooth yesterday. Either the metal heals, or I do. One of us is going to be fine. Story 4. The House the Warrant Forgot. The house knew our names before we knocked. I did not mean the old neighbor told it. I mean the draft under the door shaped my name in a whisper so soft I felt it in my teeth. Riley heard his the same way. We looked at each other, 2 uniforms with a stack of unsigned papers in the cruiser and a simple welfare check on the screen. The porch light hummed like a patient insect. All the clocks we could see through the windows were frozen at 12:47, a time that sat on the glass like frost. The neighbor met us at the gate and crossed herself without making a show of it. People do that around police when they think something has already happened. She said the owner did not keep time right, that the house went off by itself sometimes. Her breath hung in the cold and vanished before ours did. I asked when she last saw lights. She said last week, then changed it to last night, then decided she could not swear to it. The gate clicked behind us like a pencil snapping in an empty room. In the cruiser, the warrant packet waited for our signatures. Welfare check on a missed dialysis call, consent in the notes, but no answer all day. It should have been a loud knock and a form on the counter. The form stare back. I told Riley we would circle fast. We would leave if anything looked off. We would not step inside without the paper signed. He nodded. He did not reach for a pen. I did not either. That tiny hesitation is its own kind of signature if a house is listening. Up close, the door frame breathed cold, not from weather. Air moved out and back like the gap had lungs. The deadbolt was thrown from the inside. The knob turned the way a trick turns. I knocked and announced. The draft said my name again, patient this time, like a teacher. Riley whispered that he did not like it and asked if we should call for a sergeant. I said backup was 30 minutes out, and we would have this wrapped by then if we did our job. I'm not proud of how that sounded, but I'm telling you the voice I used was the kind you wear when someone is taking notes. We went around to the kitchen window. The glass carried a layer of cold that looked permanent. Inside, a table waited mid-meal. Steam rose from plates as if a hand had just set them down. The chair nearest the sink leaned back a degree, like a person had just pushed off the stand. I breathed on the glass and cleared a circle, and in the time it took to blink, the steam thinned into a greasy fog and the food blackened like a time lapse of rot. Riley said someone was inside. I said someone had been inside. The difference felt expensive. We tried the back door. A draft slid out and tasted like paper that has been stored too long. The knob gave it a polite pressure, and the door opened on its own hinge. We stepped into a kitchen that smelled like tarnish and lemon cleaner, the good kind they use in evidence rooms to fake mercy. The chair near the sink was warm under my palm for a breath, and then powdered into a film of dust when I pressed. We both backed away, because there's a kind of trick that demands respect. It is easy to call it squatters until your fingers dissolve proof. The living room held our first proof anyway. On one wall, a neat grid of photo frames displayed faces that had been scratched out. Not slashed, scratched with the nerve of someone who likes tiny, repetitive work. The scratches made their own shimmer in the low light. A group shot of our precinct picnic hung at the edge, the one with the chief in a ridiculous hat. A thumbnail oval near the right side was smooth where someone had rubbed too hard. I thought it was a defect until I leaned in and realized the glossy oval was where two faces should be. Mine and Riley's spots were there, only empty. We breathed together and pretended we had not seen that. When you want to keep your job, you do not narrate ghosts on camera. We began our sweep. Rooms repeated themselves just enough to make you doubt you had turned. Hallway photos lost faces when we passed, and sometimes regained them when we looked over shoulder too late. At the end of the hall, a narrow door waited with a key dangling from the keyhole. The key had a brass tag stamped 1247. The tag ticked once when I touched it, a bounce of light. Then it stilled as if it had made up its mind already. We should have left. The paper stack on the kitchen table had grown by a page. Not many things grow when you do not watch them, but this stack did, and the top sheet was the same warrant waiting in the cruiser, only this one had our names typed in larger font, as if the house wanted to make sure we recognized ourselves. The signature lines were blank, but faint pressure marks lay there, like someone had traced where our hands should go. I told Riley we would photograph the stack and walk. He said quietly that the house wanted signatures, that it would settle for nothing less. Something scraped in the walls then. Not mice. The sound had paper in it, a dry rasp, followed by the little shiver that thin cardstock makes when you slide it into a folder. The sound moved behind us toward the living room and stopped by the scratch photos. We swept the baseboard and found nothing but sawdust and a curled report page half chewed where something with small teeth had tried to eat words. The case number on it ended with 13. The timestamp on the bottom margin read 1247 in a font that looked a hair too neat for our printers. We radioed status. A hiss answered with our call signs and a static pop that sounded like a breath starting a name. Back up, 30 minutes, still a promise. We pushed on because that is what I do when a room dares me. The bedroom off the hall offered that same trick of freshness then ruin. A sweater folded on the chair held warmth until my fingertips made it shed like a moth wing. On the dresser lay a Polaroid taken in this very mirror. Two uniforms stood in the doorway, heads down, pens poised. You already know who they looked like. I do not believe in houses that think, not in my official life, but this one knew about paperwork. On the hallway wall opposite the scratch family photos, copies of our warrant packet were pinned in a neat grid, corner to corner, as precise as evidence tags. Some showed a blank citizen name line. Some had a name handwritten in pencil, the kind of faded pencil you use when you think you're practicing. Two copies bore my signature in a hand that looked like mine on too little sleep. A few bore Riley's name in careful block letters. Under each, stamped, was the word filed. We had not filed anything yet. The draft grew bold and stood in the doorway with us. It shaped Riley's name first, then mine. It had the soft rhythm of the neighbor at the gate, only more patient. Riley said my name out loud, and it sounded wrong in this house, as if he had borrowed it. He told me this was a mistake, and we needed to step out and call a supervisor and take the ribbing that would come. I looked at the grid of forms and thought of a promotion board that does not like mistakes, and I made a decision that will follow me everywhere I go for as long as the clocks keep time. We kept clearing. That is the phrase people use when they mean they refuse to stop. The basement door opened on air that felt wet without being wet. The stairs creaked like paper being folded, one sound per step. Under the furnace, an entire nest of shredded forms rested like a bed for something clever. Pages with our names had been chewed into marginal confetti. The pipe above it dripped a slow rhythm that matched a heartbeat if you were mean to yourself. 1247 appeared on the basement clock in a crooked digital 7-segment grin. My watch, which had been fine outside, joined it. When we came back up, the hallway looked longer. The front door stood in the distance like a rectangular moon. The kitchen table now had only 2 sheets on it, not a stack. The lines for signatures were still blank, but the faint pressure marks were deeper, as if a hand had leaned harder. Riley whispered that he felt like we should sign where the house wanted so it could let us go. He said it like someone offering a bargain to a storm. I told him no. I told him we would not write our names in a room we did not trust. My voice knew I was lying. A chair scraped in the living room. The sound had nothing to do with dust. We pivoted and found no one. The scratch photos had shifted on the wall by half an inch. Our precinct picture now had a white oval where the chief's hat had been and blank ovals where 2 patrol officers usually smiled badly. The draft said, "Riley again," then clipped it to Rye, the way I do when I am tired. He looked at me with something hurt and something like relief that the house had learned our small habits. That was when we should have asked why it cared. Then the house removed him. There is no polite way to say it. Riley walked through the doorway to the den and did not arrive. The den grew narrower by the width of a picture frame. His flashlight beam stayed on the wall in a narrow band, like a trapped moth beating its own glow. His voice came from inside a frame near the mantel, not behind the glass, but inside the depth of it, the way sound comes out of the small space behind a television if it is too close to a wall. He said my name from a place that could not hold him. I stepped to the frame and saw a living room almost like the one I stood in. In the tiny image, a figure that looked like me stood where I stood, only a fraction off, a little late, a little early, a little not yet. Riley was not reflected at all. His flashlight appeared as a stripe across the glass like a fixed lightning. I touched the frame. The surface felt warm, again for a breath, then cooled into that greasy dullness of old photos you have handled too often. The scraped faces in the other frames seemed to turn toward us without moving. I called it in the way you call in trouble when you know what you're saying will sit wrong on a log. The radio returned a roster ping that did not include us. It listed units by call sign in a calm little parade, and ours were not in the march. I said my own call sign aloud, and it sounded like a name in a language I used to speak. The draft under the front door grew busy, a whisper of papers flipping in the hands of someone who never signs until the last possible minute. The house had removed one safety net. It reached for the next with a patient thumb. The point you cannot crawl back from arrived as gently as the front door, closing behind a guest who leaves quietly. I walked to the kitchen table and picked up a pen. I told myself I was doing it for Riley because men have died for smaller reasons and worse ideas. I told myself the signature did not have to be a real one if my hand shook a certain way. I wrote my name where the pressure marks had invited me. The ink soaked fast, hungry. Riley said my name from inside the tiny room, and it had gratitude in it, and something else I choose to call warning. The house answered like a stamp coming down. The locks engaged in a polite sequence. The basement doors swung shut with respect. The walls gave a small sigh inward, as if expanding had been an effort and contracting was relief. The clocks ticked once in chorus and then froze again on 12:47, as if we had not taught them anything. I signed the second line because one signature looked lonely and because the pen felt lighter the second time. The draft warmed my face with a breath that felt like acceptance. The front door was now a photograph of a door. Signing did not free him. That was the twist the house had saved. It was not a bargain for release. It was a completion of a form that had been waiting for our exact names. The grid on the hallway wall shifted then. The pinned copies grew a new stamp in the corner reading filed, and above it a tiny printed line that said raid authorization, 2 officers present. The date under it was today. The time was 12:47. The report page in my hand wrote one more sentence on its own in neat block print. Officers identified, scene preserved, occupants absent. Riley's voice moved from the picture frame to the wall itself. He did not sound far. He also did not sound like he expected me to pull him out. I went to the glass and raised my hand. My palm at a temperature that wanted to be human and then failed. In the tiny reflection, my own face blurred at the edges, as if an eraser had been used with care. The precinct picnic photo now held 2 blank ovals where our faces had been. The chief's hat sat alone on a post with no head under it. That would have been funny at any other time. I made one last wrong choice and tried to out-procedure a house. I took the whole stack of forms from the table, tucked them under my arm, and walked toward the front door as if I could march a case file into daylight and make the facts behave. Paper rustled behind me, not mine. The sound came like a tide, 100 pages being shuffled just out of reach, growing louder in the hall, then falling away like someone had finished organizing us. The door remained a photograph. The knob accepted my grip and refused to turn like a judge accepting a plea and refusing to show teeth. Backup arrived to an empty porch and a neighbor who said we had gone in and not come out. They knocked and called and tried the knob and did not force the door because their paperwork was in their car and they were not fools. That is what the house wanted. Not heroic entry. Correct entry. I know because I watched it from the corners of frames, one after another, like walking the rows of a firing range in a dream. I saw their shapes double for a second in the glass, and then they made the only choice that keeps you employed, and they stepped away. Dawn reset the rooms with a kind of politeness that made me want to break plates. The clocks relaxed into day numbers. The chair by the sink held shape for a whole minute before it surrendered into dust. The photo frames smoothed over some of the scratches, as if a thumb had licked a cloth and wiped them clean. Somewhere in that, Riley's voice came back to the exact place beside me and said my name in a tone I will hear in traffic and in lines at the bank and during soft weather for the rest of my life. He stood next to me because the house had decided we were finally filed. We left by a door that had always been a door. The neighbor waved like a person who had watched a trick and promised not to clap. In the cruiser, the warrant packet sat with a new page on top. Our signatures were there, ink dry, neat and centered like the best day in Academy. I checked the body cam feed and saw the rooms in black and white as if they had been daytime all along. I scrubbed the timeline to where Riley vanished and the file jumped a minute, then filled itself with a still image of kitchen clock reading 12:47. Our faces were not in the footage even when the frame faced us. At the precinct, the group photo on the wall had a new gloss as if someone had printed a fresh copy. Two ovals near the right side were white as bone china. Our names were missing from the call board. The sergeant scowled at the error and wrote them in by hand, and his pen left a faint track in the laminated surface like a dry river. Dispatch swore we had been on the roster all night. The log for our unit showed silent from 12:17 to 12:49 with a note I did not write that Red House cleared. No contact. People asked what the house was. Folklore. A bad call that laundered itself into a story. Me, I think it was a stack of papers that got tired of waiting and learned to build rooms around itself. I think 12:47 is the moment a prior raid did not go right and time stuck there like a bubble. I think doors breathe when you teach them your names. On calm afternoons, I ask Riley what he thinks, and he says he does not think about it because he likes sleep. But I've seen him stop at the precinct group photo and touch the gloss where our faces should go, as if checking for heat you only feel with your fingertips. The last time I drove past the house, the neighbor was watering a strip of grass like a runway. She lifted her hand and pointed at her wrist as if to ask the time, then laughed and shook her head like we shared a joke that needed no words. The curtains shifted inside a room I could not see, and a little breath of air came out to the street and said my name without sound. I kept driving. The pen in my pocket felt warmer than plastic should. Somewhere behind me, paper rustled gently, like a room tidying itself for a guest it expects. If you go out there with a lawful stack and a clean conscience, you might be fine. Or you might sign your way into a house that keeps better records than we do. If you hear your name in the draft, decide whether that is respect or habit. If all the clocks read 12:47, do what you have always done and call it in. Then check the roster to see if you're still on it. If you're not, walk back to your car, open your packet, and see if your hand has learned a new way to write your name. Story 5, Evidence Bag 309. If you have ever worked in evidence room after midnight, you know the sound of the cooler fans. It is a low breath that makes the plastic bags sway a little on their hooks, like the room is thinking. That was the first thing I noticed the night bag 309 started updating itself. The second thing was the smell. Iron and lemon. Not coppery and sharp like a movie, just faint, like a cut finger washed in cleaner and hidden in a pocket. The third thing was the camera at the ceiling blinking at 12:09 and then pretending nothing had blinked. My name is Jordan Vega. I'm not a hero. I'm a clerk who likes forms lined up and labeled straight. Last year, I botched an audit, and I've been paying for it one neat stack at a time. 3 days to this year's inspection. Every bag had a type tag with a barcode that scanned to a line item that matched a shelf and a case and a person. Except 309. Its tag was handwritten in a neat block print that annoyed me. The numbers were too perfect. The letters were mine if my hand were tired. I told myself some detective made it up on the fly. Then I opened the vault and the smell climbed out like a habit. Iron and lemon. Same as the lockers on rainy days when you clean too hard. The first time I unzipped the tape on 309, a dime-sized shard of mirror slid into my palm and kissed my lifeline with a cold mouth. I bagged the shard and wrote the time, 12:09 a.m. The camera at the ceiling flickered and saved nothing. The log printed a healthy green line like a hospital monitor. On my desk, the audit sheet reminded me that I do not get second mistakes. An hour later, patrol booked a suspect on a shoplift and a scuffle. His keychain had a little snap mirror on it broken clean in a dime-sized bite. My bag shard matched the missing piece like teeth. The case number on his property sheet ended with 309. I did not write that number. It just appeared in the same block print as the tag. If you have ever caught your own handwriting saying something you did not say yet, you know how your stomach changes shape for a minute. I told myself another officer planted the shard to make me look good or bad. I even knew who it could be. Mendez does this dry little smirk when he walks evidence through. The one that says he leaves presents if you are careless. So I pulled the camera feed. At 12:09, the frame white-screened and labeled itself lost signal. At 12:10, it came back showing me, with 309 in my hands and my expression already guilty. The hallway cam outside was clean. No one in or out. No Mendez. No prank. Just me in a bag that smelled like blood, teaching a room to breathe with it. At 2 a.m., I went to fetch more seals and knocked a folder behind the shelf. It fluttered down like a lazy pigeon. Unfiled property form. Same block letters. Last handler, Vega J. Date line blank. The note field had a single word that made my mouth dry. Posthumous is a cold word dressed in a suit. I put the form back behind the shelf and told myself it was a bad joke that had never been told out loud. When I clocked out, my sister called. She is a defense attorney who still answers my texts, even when my job makes hers harder. She said to be careful with the audit and with my temper. She said tampering is not always a dramatic act. It can be a tired act. I said I had everything under control. I did not tell her about the smell, or the camera, or the neat handwriting that looked like mine and did not belong to any mood I have had. If you have a sibling who keeps you honest, you know how to lie in a way that sounds like you were protecting them. The next night, I tried to prove 309 was boring. I checked it at 11:59. Empty. A single paper tag, no content, no weight. I checked it again at 12:07. Same. At 12:09, the camera blinked and the smell lifted like a memory, getting its second wind. Inside the bag, now, sat a keychain with a dried dark stain on the leather fob. Not red, not dramatic, just dried and darker, like something that was once alive and had been filed. I dated it and logged it and set it aside to avoid letting the smell climb into my clothes. At 1:30, patrol brought in a man from a domestic call. He handed over his property in a tray with a keychain missing its fob. He said a woman took it when he blocked her from leaving. The fob in my bag had a little stamped paw print on it. His keychain loop had a stretch mark in the exact shape. I showed nothing. I only logged the tray and initialed the line twice so the letters would look like mine. I wanted to take the paw print home to let my cat touch it with his little foot and break the spell. I wanted to do that the way a child wants to take a weather vane down and show it to the wind. At 3, I pulled files for the audit and found a new folder in my cart, tucked under the stack like a polite mouse. Photographs, not printed by our lab, not stamped. They were images of an alley behind the old asylum building, the one with the chain link door no one uses. In the first, The dumpster's lid sat crooked. In the second, a coffee cup hugged the curb with a ring of T on the concrete shaped like an eclipse. In the third, someone had spray painted 309 on the brick in a lazy hand. The date on the back was tomorrow. I carried the photos to the captain and set them on his desk. He flipped through and smiled. He said my audit packet looked clean. Then he handed the pictures back like I had given him coasters. He did not ask why they smelled like iron and lemon. He did not ask why I looked like I wanted to leave my skin folded on his chair and walk home without it. He told me I was doing fine and said to tell Mendez to stop writing on evidence if I saw him. At 11:50 the next night, I sneaked to the alley and stood where the photos had stood. If you have ever tried to surprise the future, you know how foolish it makes you feel. The chain link door sighed. Something moved on the other side of the fence in the way cardboard moves when you have stored it too long and it wants to sag. The spray paint was not there. The coffee cup was not there. The iron and lemon smell was there. It rode in on the river as if the water had washed a hospital and brought back the rinse. At 12:09, a light flickered in a window 6 stories up. I looked down, and the number 309 had appeared on the brick in a wet shine like a tongue had written it. It was just condensation, but the shape held. The call came over the radio 2 minutes later. Suspicious person in the alley behind the asylum. Patrol rolled up and found no one. Before they left, I set my coffee cup near the curb by accident and lifted it with a wet ring on the concrete in the shape of an eclipse. I wiped it with my sleeve and told myself I had not duplicated an image to make a prophecy feel honest. When I returned to the room, bag 309 had updated itself again. No camera entry. No seal broken. Inside the bag sat a folded parking stub from a garage I use when it rains. My license plate number was on it. The date was tomorrow. The time was 12:09. The back had my block print in a note I have never written to anyone. If found, return to Vega, chain of custody intact. I put the stub back in the bag and resealed it in a way that made the seal look resealed. That is a trick I have taught my hands and never told my sister. I made a decision. I printed everything. I made a second binder. I told myself that if I logged the next weirdness immediately, I could control it by describing it. If you have ever explained a bad thing like it is a recipe, you know the feeling of confidence that does not last. At 12:05 on the third night, I stood by 309 with a fresh bag and a pen. At 12:09, the room flickered. The smell sharpened like a breath held too long. When the light came back, my badge lay inside, cracked through the shield. The number etched clean. The back plate spidered like a drop had hit it. The date on the evidence tag was tomorrow. I laughed then. It was not a nice sound. It came out of my throat like a hinge. For a crazy moment, I thought someone had swapped my badge while I stood there, but mine was still clipped to my shirt. I unpinned it and held both up. They were identical. My cracked one had a tiny scratch at the bottom where my desk drawer catches. The one from the bag had the same scratch and a smear that looked like lemon cleaner dried in a hurry. I took out a magnifier. My own habit marks were in the metal on the bagged one. The crack in the plate followed the faint white stress line my badge has had since Academy when I dropped it and pretended I did not. Choice presents itself like a friend in a hallway. Destroy the bag and say it fell apart, or catalog the thing that knows your end. I sealed the cracked badge in a second bag and wrote the number with a hand that could pass as mine on any day. Then I put both badges down and called my sister. The call rang and rang. When she answered, her breath sounded like someone walking on carpet trying not to wake a house. She said she had a late filing and could we talk tomorrow? She said it like a person who expected a main. I told her to sleep. I did not tell her my name was stamped on tomorrow in a font that had already decided what I would be. If I had been smart, I would have asked for leave. Instead, I decided to intervene. The asylum alley. The parking garage. The number 309. I went to the garage early and stood by the pay station like a clerk on the wrong shift. At 12:09, the camera flickered in the corner of the ceiling. A man came down the stairwell and looked at me like I was furniture. He dropped his stub and did not see it. I picked it up and felt a static crawl and a little lemon scent. The stub in my hand matched the one in the bag down to the crease. I put it in my pocket, which is its own kind of sin. The next day, the bag contained a second stub with a note on the back that was not mine, written in a hand that tries to mimic and misses. It said, "Return to evidence. Chain clean." Under that, printed, "Last handler, Vega, J date, a week from now." The word posthumous appeared like a watermark when I tilted it under the light. It was not written. It was in the paper. I do not know how to explain that in a way that will satisfy anyone who loves only facts. I accused Mendez anyway. It was easier to be angry than to be precise. He looked at me with the tired eyes of a person who has stopped playing jokes because the world has outpaced him. He said I was scaring the techs. He said the cameras were fine, except when the clock got weird at 12:09, and no one understood why. He asked me if I needed to talk to someone. I said I just needed the audit to pass. He agreed in that sing-song way people use when they realize your problem is bigger than the thing you said out loud. Isolation, if you have not met it, is best measured in how quietly your room respects your panic. By the last night before inspection, bag 309 had the weight and smell of a drawer that acts like a stomach. I did my rounds. I counted tags like beads. I listened for the camera click and told myself it was a relay. At 12:08, I took a deep breath and opened 309 before it did its trick. The bag was empty but for a folded report and a thin strip of tape like a bookmark. I slid the report out. It was a property sheet for my badge, signed by me, countersigned by the captain, date stamped tomorrow. In the narrative, a neat line read recovery at scene. Chain intact, cause unlisted. The point of no return is not a dramatic choice. It is the quiet knowledge that you have already chosen. I put the report back and sealed the bag and set it on the shelf and walked to the exit and turned off the lights. Then I turned them back on because the room without the lights felt too eager. The camera blinked 12:09 one more time, and when it came back, I could see my reflection in the small convex dome. My reflection did not move. I lifted my hand, and my reflection forgot to lift its hand. The dome showed a room that did not include me. The smell of iron and lemon filled my mouth like a polite glove. I went to the asylum alley because I could not stop myself. The night was a wet fabric. The chain-link door sighed the way it had. The spray paint 309 bloomed again in condensation like a breath written on glass. In the puddle by the curb, my reflection did not appear. The lights of the building trembled. My breath came and did not fog. I held my badge and the bag badge like I could balance the scale. They felt equal. From the far end of the alley came a noise like a cardboard box collapsing in slow time. I took a step that did not make a sound, which is not something footsteps do. I will not describe anything that breaks rules here. No violence, no body, just a certainty pressing down like a paperweight. A coffee cup rolled from somewhere and bumped my shoe and left a pale ring on the concrete. The iron and lemon smell rose as if someone had lifted a lid from the room. In the window above, a light flickered and held. In the convex camera dome at the corner, the reflection showed the alley without me. A shadow crossed the frame that looked like a man carrying a small plastic bag. And if you freeze it at the right second, the strip of ceiling tape looks like a smile. I found myself back at the evidence room desk, as if the night had folded me like a note and delivered me to the right pocket. Bag 309 sat on the counter under the camera that had never seen anything. Inside, my badge lay cracked, sealed, logged, countersigned. Next to it sat the mirror shard, the paw print fob, the parking stub with my plate, the alley photos, the second stub with the watermark, and a slip of paper I recognized because I had almost put it back behind the shelf. Last handler, Vega, J date, today. The word posthumous floated in the fibers like it had always been there, waiting for light. I did the only thing my neatness knew how to do. I signed the chain correctly. I sealed the bag with a seal that will test true if anyone ever questions it. I placed 309 on the hook labeled 30X with the other 30s and wrote the audit code on the clipboard and checked the box and heard the pen scratch like a very small animal content in its den. The camera blinked once more and then stayed steady in the way things do when they decide you will no longer argue with them. The audit passed. The captain shook my hand with the dry grip of a man who respects order more than people. My sister hugged me and said she had a weird dream about mirrors and told me to take a day off, which is her way of saying stay alive. I told her I would. That night, at 12:09, Bag 309 added a final thing while the camera watched and pretended not to see. A laminated card with my name and the word retired where it should have said deceased. The font was wrong by a hair. It was not our printer. It smelled like lemon, even through plastic. One thread I have not pulled. The little mirror shard from the first night. I kept the second one. Do not yell at me. I am telling you because part of confession is making someone witness. When I hold it up in the evidence room light, it shows everything except me. It shows the swaying bags and the fans breathing and the small red blink on the rack that should not blink and the hook labeled 309 with a bag that fogs its own plastic as if it holds breath. It does not show my hand. It does not show my face. If I slide the shard back beside its sister, the fog fades and the iron and lemon scent rests again, like the room has filed me where I belong. If you ever smell cleaner and coin in the same breath at midnight, check the ceiling clock. If it says 12:09 and flinches, do not open anything you cannot sign later. If an evidence tag is handwritten, look at the letters. If they are yours, choose carefully what you will admit. The bag will learn your habits. It will take the smallest thing you think is harmless, a cup ring, a scuff, a scratch, and it will make a chain you cannot argue with. It is not cruel. It is precise. Precision can feel like mercy if you are tired. That is my story, written as cleanly as I can write it. Bag 309 sits on its hook, and sometimes the plastic fog a little like there is weather inside. Sometimes the security camera blinks at 12:09, and the recording says it did not. Sometimes the audit binder falls open on its own to the page where my initials are tidy and centered. The last thing I will tell you is the only part one did not catalog. When I lock up, a quiet sound follows me down the hall. It is the soft press of sealing tape being stroked flat by a thumb that has done this many times and will do it again. That was tonight's descent into shadows. 5 patrol stories no Academy handbook could ever prepare you for. From highways that call you by name to lockers that write their own reports. Each one a reminder that sometimes procedure isn't protection. It's the ritual that keeps the dark satisfied. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. Tell me in the comments, which story clung to you the hardest? Was it the dispatch that knew too much, the body cam that saw too far, the locker that counted nights, the house that signed its own warrant, or the bag that files the living with the dead? Don't forget to leave a like if your heart's still steady, and subscribe if you dare come back, because there are always more stories waiting in the silence between radio calls or in the files no one double checks. Until next time, keep your light steady, keep your doors locked, and remember, the scariest reports are the ones we never write down.